The name of Mark Hunt is known to everyone who has anything to do with MMA or other fighting sports. During his career in MMA, Mark twice found himself one step away from the title. First he fought with Fedor for the Pride belt, and then with Verdum for the interim UFC belt. In both cases, Hunt lost, and in MMA he has no trophies and not outstanding statistics, but what does it matter at all if he was loved not for titles but for cool fights and behavior during those fights? And today we remember the entire career of Mark Hunt in K-1, where he excelled much more and had fun even before moving to Pride in UFC. At the beginning of his career, Mark went to fight on a pure enthusiasm and was ready to fight just for a six-pack. It was such a hefty fee that he received after his first knockout victory in 1995. After his debut, Mark won 14 more battles and took 4 losses before making his way to the Oceania K-1 tournament. Hunt's first 20 fights took place in New Zealand and Australia, and these bouts are not even in his official record. Well, in 2000, the full rise of Super Samoan has begun. Mark arrived at K-1 Oceania as a clear outsider, and at this time, he was an ordinary peasant ready to save any event and come out on short notice with the most modest financial appetites. At the first stage of the KO tournament, Mark faced Clay Amatagi, who was nicknamed the Coconut Breaker, although I'm pretty sure there was a little more meaning in this nickname than it seems. Fraternal hugs before the fight and immediately falling in the first seconds. In this clash of two rhinos, sparks were flying the entire first round. Both characters were loading each strike, trying to end the fight with a knockout, but in the first segment, no one even fell once and the round turned out pretty much equal. Mark started the second round even more aggressively, not allowing Clay to even move away from the ropes, and then the first knockdown arrived just in time. Mark smiled at his chubby friend and knocked him out with the next combination. He made a straight right towards the movement and the Coconut Breaker collapsed. That evening, Mark beat another fighter from the team of Ray Sefo. Hunt's second client was Ray's brother Ronnie Sefo, and the Super Samoan passed the semi-final by decision. In the finale, Mark faced British kickboxer Phil Fagan, aka Technician. Techie was very similar to Ernesto Hoost, although on really minimal level. The Technician quite justified his nickname, perfectly firing at Mark from a distance and on the backsteps. He was tirelessly shooting low kicks and throwing out doubles, and Mark couldn't get to his working distance to cover Phil with his bomb. In the second half of the round, Phil's battery blinked red and needed recharging, and Mark was getting closer and his punches began to reach the target. In the second segment, Mark began to fall Phil through and his right hand gave the British big problems. After a tough straight punch, Mark finishes off his opponent with an uppercut and makes up the second knockout of the evening. So the technique didn't help the Technician and Mark became the champion of the Oceania Grand Prix, which became a trampoline to the next level. The Super Samoan went to Japan for the qualifying Grand Prix for the World Tournament, but there he was greeted unfriendly by the French cyborg Jerome Lebana, who probably became the main Mark's rival in K-1. Cyborg beat Mark by decision and sent him back to Australia, where Hunt competed at the Melbourne Grand Prix, and at this time he arrived as the favourite, not an outsider. At the first stage, Mark had a fight with Nathan Briggs, and I know absolutely nothing about him, but according to the words of the commentators, he was a pretty strong local kickboxer. Well, by that time, Mark was already such a tough and respected fighter in Australia that, according to the terms of the contract, he had a personal pedicure master who quickly cut off the eagle's claws of the Samoan before the fight. This fight ended up with a complete D-class from Hunt. Each approach of Mark to Nathan ended in fear, pain and knockdown. And when Nathan's ass 3 times felt the canvas, the referee intervened and stopped the fight. So Mark had registered his first volunteer in just 57 seconds, without spending much gasoline, made it to the Grand Prix semi-finals. At the second stage, the Samoan fought Andrew Peck, also known as Peckosaurus, and in theory, this guy was more dangerous than Nathan. He was the 2000 New Zealand Grand Prix champion, and according to Wikipedia, had no K-1 losses but 5 wins.
The big bomb, the sleeping pill.
In the first seconds, Peck collides Mark's right hand and flies to the canvas. After this shock, he gets up, but only to fall again. Hunt's next attack, Deadly Combo, and Andrew is knocked out. So this time Mark reissued his own standard and issued Pechosaurus even faster than Briggs. It took him 48 seconds to become one of the 2 finalists of the tournament. In the final battle, Hunt got into a fight with a quite famous Australian kickboxer Peter Graham, nicknamed the Chief, who is initially remembered for the war with Badr Hari and the knockout that broke Moroccan's jaw in several places.
Well, Michael, I think Peter Graham has certainly shown a lot of heart.
Peter starts with high kicks, but you need at least 2 croc-hops and them hitting simultaneously if you want to break Mark's skull, since even one couldn't high kick the Samoan. To all these kicks, Mark responded with a knockdown and sincerely fed Graham with uppercuts. Peter could do nothing about Hunt's cannons, who was regularly reaching him and playing hard and accurate combinations. In the second round, Mark continued his assault and like a tank he was going forward without stopping, smashed Graham with a series of blows, and he still wasn't feeling Peter's high kicks and even took them up without raising his hands. He was really confident in his armor.
Can't bring you home the bacon now.
Oh, there's a lot. Very dangerous here.
Into the final minute now of the fight.
There it is! There it is!
In the third round, Mark's uppercut made the day. He hit exactly into Graham's beard and knocked down the Australian, who couldn't get up in time. So the third knockout of the evening, complete domination in all fights, and the well-deserved Grand Prix championship for the second time in a row. A serious application for participation in the World Tournament, where big legends were about to fight and Mark was on his way to become a part of their company. After winning the tournament in Melbourne, Mark went to the next qualifying Grand Prix, which he needed to win in order to qualify for the World Championship. So Hunt was walking to his goal from the very bottom, and he was doing it brightly and confidently. At the first stage, one of the most talented Japan's fighters, Hiromi Yamada, stood in his way. Mark switches the aggression toggle to the maximum from the very beginning of the fight and presses the Japanese to the ropes. In this fight he decided to bet on a quick knockout. Yamada responds with a jab and doubles on the backstep, but Mark doesn't even feel these punches and only improves during the fight, adding a flying knee to the round, which is not often seen from fighters with such a weight and physique. For Hiromi, the fight ended very quickly. Mark nevertheless got him with his right hand and knocked him out at the end of the first round, recorded a beautiful knockout and received a ticket to the semi-finals, where Ernesto Hoost was waiting for him. The barrier in the form of Mr. Perfect became impassable for Hunt, and he's lost to Hoost by decision. It seemed that Mark missed his chance to participate at the World Grand Prix, but luck intervened the situation. Krokop was injured, and the organizers gave the Samoan one more chance, as they understood that even if he didn't pass the qualification, then it was definitely possible to count on a spectacular fight. This was the reason for choosing Mark. Ironically, Hunt fought Sefo, and in the evening of October 8, 2001, a truly delicious dish was awaiting the audience like Samoan steak.
Any difference in tactics that you were thinking of?
No difference in tactics, just go out there and it's my last chance to make Tokyo Dome, so we'll see what happens. See what happens today.
Mark began the fight very aggressively, pressing Sefo to the ropes, throwing his bombs at him, but Ray, after taking considerable damage and having survived the Samoan storm, began to respond very hard. Lethal counterblow that would have knocked down the elephant, but Hunt acted as if he hadn't even felt this punch. After that, Sefo took the initiative and he began to hit more. So the first round was one continuous action with exchanges on a collision course. It is not easy to give someone a preference, but anyway Sefo delivered more accurate punches. The second round turned out to be no less sparkling, and Mark decided to take even more punches to prove that this superhero cannot be broken without a special kind of magic potion. He was defending himself with hands down, and Sefo's boxing was at a very high level, and the most finishes in his career he made exactly with the help of his hands. From that moment, a real show of two actors has begun, which the audience accepted with great enthusiasm and applause. It was a vicious rumble which was carried out with smiles on their faces, and even during the fight Sefo managed to kiss Mark. By the way, if you want a big review on Sefo, press likes on this video, and in the near future I will probably do about Ray. So this evening there were no losers. The audience enjoyed the meal, Sefo won the fight by decision, and Mark moved on to the World Grand Prix, because despite Sefo's victory by decision, he got an eye injury and couldn't perform second time that evening. Then Mark came on as his substitute, beat Adam Watts and qualified for the World Tournament. During the draw for the World 8, when Mark's turn to choose an opponent for himself came up, after a short thought he decided that it was time to pay back his debts and chose Lebana. Although he could have approached an empty cell, even then he would have fought either Urs or Filio, so this great rivalry was continued in the second episode. Lebana immediately started throwing kicks at Mark, testing the strength of his armor, which as usual worked without interruptions and failures. As if in the first round Mark worked rather calmly and restrained, then in the second he switched to the Super Samoan mode, which tried its best to finish off Cyborg.
K-1 選手たちも我を忘れて興奮した。そして
Mark is doing a long-lasting combo that knocks out Jerome's software and the French knockout machine crashes. Hunt knocked out Jerome in the second round and won the fight ahead of time while equaling the score in this rivalry. At the second stage, the Samoan got the opportunity to pay one more debt. He was supposed to fight Ernesto Hoost, but he was injured in his previously won battle, and Stefan Lecco, who lost to Hoost, jumped out to replace him. Yes, there were such imperfect rules in those tournaments when the defeated was passing on and the winner ended his participation in the tournament. In this battle, things began to develop rapidly. Mark bent Lecco with his first double, but Stefan got better very quickly and continued the fight. By such an active start, it seemed that the fight would be short and Hunt would finish Stefan. But this never happened, and the fight went through all 3 rounds, as a result of which Mark took the victory and became the finalist of the tournament.
Now you're one away from being the K-1 champion. How do you feel?
I feel good. Feel good. Yeah, it's lucky. Yeah, I feel good.
So next is either Alexei or Filio.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah. Yep.
As usual, a very eloquent interview from Mark, who when asked with whom he would like to fight in the finale, with Ignacio or Filio, answered yes, and eventually fought with Brazilian karate fighter. The Samoan has beaten Francisco by decision in the extra round and became the winner of the World Grand Prix, to which he walked for a very long and painful time. But many circumstances were in his favour, and the name of Mark Hunt is on a par with the best K-1 fighters, to whom this peak conquered. In 2 years, Mark has come a long way from the New Zealand average dude who fights for beer to the World Grand Prix champion. After his triumph, Hunt didn't hesitate for a long time. After a little more than a month, he again went onto the warpath and got in the way of the Japanese kickboxer Tsuyoshi Nakasako, who in the very first minutes of the fight was pinned to the ropes and got the champion's donuts. The knockdown was only a matter of time, and it happened very soon. But despite his supremacy, Mark couldn't finish off the Japanese in the first segment, and the fight went into the second round. In the second round, Tsuyoshi beautifully high-kicked Mark and the Samoan collapsed, but immediately got on his feet and shifted the gear up. We have to pay respect to Nakasako, who wasn't afraid and took the fight on a collision course. In these exchanges, he almost dropped Mark with a high kick again, and then he missed the left hook and fell to the canvas. Apparently, this fall has broken a little bit the spirit of Japanese, and knockdowns started to follow one after another. Tsuyoshi could no longer contain this Samoan courage, so after 3 knockdowns, the referee stopped the fight, awarding the victory to Hunt.
Have you got any strategy for tonight's fight?
The strategy is try and win. That's the strategy.
In 2004, the courses of Hunt and Lebana collided again. In the Grand Prix champion status, Hunt went to the Cyborg's territory. The fight took place in France and then became one of the brightest battles in the history of K-1, especially the second round, which is included in the Golden Collection of kickboxing fans. The score was 1-1, and that evening the fighters went out to put a fat and bloody point in this rivalry. If the first round was an easy one with bitings and chokings in which Lebana remained more active, then in the second round a real carnage when knockdowns and heart failures began. Jerome dropped Mark with an accurate counter jab, after which the Samoan became very depressed and was literally trying to survive under a hail of strikes. But after missing a little, Hunt activated himself and exploded with a series of blows, paying back to Jerome. At the end of the round, barely alive Cyborg launched a high kick which dropped Mark for the second time. After that, the gong has rung and the fighters went to the corners to get back to their senses. Unfortunately, Hunt was unable to reach the third round and the fight was stopped by his team. Jerome won their third fight and the score in this rivalry became 2-1. And it's a pity that Mark couldn't continue the fight, since the intensity of the battle was so high that the third round, I'm sure, wouldn't have disappointed us.
What happened there in the
second round, or I had couldn't see. I couldn't see properly in my eyes. I had a little bit of my eyes or something.
As it turned out, Mark couldn't continue due to eye problems, and from this interview it is clear how deeply in his heart he took this defeat, or defeat in this exact way, since he talked with the journalist with tears in his eyes. Half a year later, the Super Samoan got to the World Tournament again, and if at the first stage he brilliantly finished Stefan Lecco with a left hook, then at the second stage Cyborg was waiting for him again, who beat Mark one more time by decision and didn't let him to the Grand Prix finals. After finishing the confrontation with Cyborg, Mark beat Gary Goodridge by decision and gave up kickboxing for 5 years, fully dedicating himself to MMA. This is how the adventure of a Super Samoan turned out on the K-1 warfields. A bunch of bright battles and titles, the main trophy and the world recognition as one of the most dangerous punchers in the world. If you liked the story today, then like the video, subscribe to the channel and comment which fight you liked the most. Any activity will help the video to move forward. Also, if you need a great review on Sefo, you know what to do.